Okay, students, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for joining this session. So today I'm gonna explain to you about the next topic in our green computing class, and it is about how we can make our source code and algorithm to be more green. Yeah. Okay, so the title of this topics is Green Coding, Source Code, and Algorithm Optimizations. So, in this topic, in general, we are going to talk about how we can make our source code, our program, to become more efficient and energy aware. Yeah. So we're gonna discuss about the algorithm efficiency, energy complexity, and then we also gonna discuss about the green coding design patterns, also input output optimization and parallelism, and the last is we gonna talk about the profiling, refactoring, and ethics. Yeah. Okay, so in the previous two materials we already discussed about the two layers of seven layers in software greening. Yeah, so we have learned about the programming language greening and platform and runtime environment, and now we are going to discuss about the source code and algorithms. Yeah, so this is the third layer of our seven layers in software greening. Okay, so now let's go to the first topic. It is about the algorithm efficiency and energy complexity. So, in green software, efficiency means more than speed. It means energy. What does it mean? So, when we create a software, we have to make sure that our software is not only just working. So, we need to think about how to make our software become efficient, because the more efficient our software, the less energy it will consume. Yeah, so it is connected directly to our concept of green software engineering. Yeah, and talking about the efficiency in software, usually we will talk about the complexity. And in the software engineering, we have three types of complexity. So what is complexity? Complexity actually is how we can say that a software is consuming a lot or less. Yeah. So whether it is, for example, about the time complexity. So if our software's time complexity is high, then it means it will need a lot more time to execute its job. Yeah. So to finish executing its job, it will requires a lot more time. So the same goes on space complexity and energy complexity. So if time complexity meaning that how much time our software need to execute, the space complexity means how many storage, yeah, how much storage that our software will use whenever it is executed. And energy complexity corresponds to the number of energy that is needed to execute our software. Yeah. Okay, so for time complexity, the longer the CPU stay active, the more energy it draws. It reducing operations count directly, and reducing operation count directly will reduce the energy consumed. Space complexity, activate RAM draws continuous power. So when we store any variable or data on RAM, for example, it so it will also consume some amount of power. So large structures kept in the memory equals to sustained energy cost across the runtime. So when we store a lot of amount of data in a RAM in longer time, it will also means that we also consume a lot of energy in a certain time. Yeah. Okay, and energy complexity, the combined effect of time and memory plus the hardware activity, this is what we call by energy complexity. This is the true green metric. So how much electricity does this code consume? Yeah? So when we measure, yeah, the green metric, about a software or source code, we will talk about the energy complexity. Okay, so talking about the complexity of an algorithm, yeah, we can take a look at one example of algorithm. The one of the most basic algorithm, it is sorting algorithm. Yeah. So as you might already learn in the previous semesters, usually in the basic programming course, yeah, you already learn about some types of sorting algorithm. So we have bubble sort, we have selection sort, we have merge sort, we have quick sort, we have team sort. Yeah. So each of the sorting algorithm, they will have different complexity. Yeah. And usually complexity will be uh, written as a big O notation. Yeah. So different algorithm will have different big O notation. Why? Because different algorithm, they will have different number of steps, different number of complexity. So for example, like bubble sort, the energy needed in bubble sort is very high. Yeah. Why? Because the complexity of the bubble sort, the steps required to be done in bubble sort is a lot more compared to the other algorithms. Yeah. So bubble sort peak O notation or complexity is O n square. Yeah. It means that if we have 100 data to be sorted, then the time needed to finish the job will be 100 times 100. So 100, so it is quadratic function of the number of our data. So if we have 10 data, then we will need uh, 100 100 units of time. So and if we have 100 data, then we will need 10,000, yeah, 10,000 unit of time. And if we have 1,000 of data, we will need 1 million unit of times to complete the bubble sort. Yeah, this is one example of complexity. So the more complex the algorithm, the more steps needs to be executed in an algorithm, it will directly impact the energy consumption or the complexity of the algorithm itself. Yeah. Um, Now let us compare the bubble sort with others, yeah, with others more efficient algorithms, yeah, such as merge sort, yeah, because merge sort's complexity is O n log n. This meaning that if we have n amount of data, yeah, so we will need the log n, yeah, log n units of time to finish the algorithm. Yeah. So this is very efficient. And we have also quicksort. If you forgot about how quicksort works, maybe you can take a look at the internet for more information, or maybe you can open your previous job sheet or previous material in your basic algorithm. You can compare the how bubble sort work versus how quicksort work, and then you will understand, yeah, why bubble sort will need a lot more complexity and quick sorts will need just a little less complexity compared to the bubble sort. Yeah. So what does it mean? What does it mean? How I show you this chart? Yeah. This is to give some picture to you. Yeah, that the choice of the algorithms is important. Yeah. So we cannot take library, or we cannot use an algorithm, or we cannot create an algorithm just to make our program run, yeah, just to accomplish our goal. Yeah. So if we want to do sorting, of course we can use bubble sort, selection sort, merge sort, quick sort, time sort, any algorithm we can use. Yeah, any algorithm we can use, but it does not mean that every or all of the algorithm is efficient. Yeah. So not so the efficiency, the complexity of each algorithms can be different. Yeah. So there are many algorithms, there are many libraries, there are many dependencies out there. Yeah. But this is important for us to understand how the algorithm works, and uh, consequently how will be the energy cost that is needed. Yeah. So this is one example of complexity and energy impact. So the more complexity an algorithm has, yeah, so the more energy impact it will also has. Yeah. So this is important when you choose whether it is an existing algorithm, yeah, or when you want to create your algorithm. So make sure when you are creating your algorithm, don't just make your algorithm works, yeah, but make your algorithm as efficient as possible. Yeah, this is the importance of this slide. Yeah. Okay, so move to the next topic. It is about the green coding design patterns. Yeah. So we can, in whenever we create an application, we can write our source code. We can write our source code as we want. Yeah. So we can do it. I mean, we can do it like this. Yeah. So whenever I want to create a software, I can choose between creating a software that is good enough, or I want to, or I create a software that is just working. Yeah. Just meeting our client's goal, for example. Yeah. There is choice. There is choice. Yeah. So uh, there the as in it is in a real world, yeah, every choice will have their impact, yeah, will have their consequence, yeah, but it is not also different in the software. Of course, if we just type our source code, and as long as our client's goal is achieved, then it will be okay. Yeah, of course, we can also think, we can think about, we can think like that. Yeah. But on the other side, we can also choose to write our software in a clean way, in an efficient way, in more efficient way, so that our software not just only work, but it is also more efficient. Yeah. So there are some best practices uh, in coding architecture, yeah, on how we write our code. Yeah. Some of them are this one. Yeah. So first, avoid redundant computation. Yeah. So never recalculate the same value twice. Store results and reuse them. Every repeated calculation wastes CPU cycles and electricity. Yeah. So this means that you need to maximize your code. Yeah. You need to maximize your code. No need to write again the same code for in different place. Yeah. For example, in whenever you create a website, in a menu you need to display some items. Yeah. And then in different menus you also need to display the same items. Yeah. So avoid to create same code that will execute the same process in different places. Yeah. So instead of writing the same codes every here and there, you can write once, and then you can tweak your code. Yeah. So maybe it can use the same code. Yeah. Uh, be, you can use the maybe it can use the same code. Yeah. Other than creating the same code again in different place. Yeah. It is what I mean by avoid redundant computation. Yeah. Then next, choose right data structure. Yeah. So when we create application, of course we will talk about data, yeah, either data in a variable or either data in storage. Yeah. So every data it is having its purpose. Yeah. So based on the purpose that you want to achieve, please select the proper data types. We have data structure, sorry. Yeah. So we have several data structures such as array, list, linked list, and also map or hash or dictionary, something like that. We have so many data structure types. Yeah, please, you have to understand what are those data types and in which case those data types will be more suitable. Yeah. Next is about caching and memoization. Yeah. Store results of expensive compute operations, memoization or function level caching can eliminate up to 99% of redundant CPU work. For example, like Fibonacci recursion. So sometimes when we create a program, so we need to display the result of a calculations more than once. Yeah. So instead of we calculate again and again, yeah, for example, like when you create mobile applications and then in a particular page they have it shows some calculation result, yeah. So whenever a user open another page and then back again to the first page, you do again the calculation. So it means it is what I mean by recalculation, yeah. So instead of you calculate again every time the user open the first page, you can do something like this. So you calculate once and then you store the value in a variable or in a global variable or maybe in memory or maybe in text file, yeah. And then whenever it is needed to shown again to the user, you just need to call, yeah, just need to call the previous calculation result, yeah. So instead of you are again calculating again every time the user opens the page, yeah. This is what I mean by caching and memoization. Then we also need to know about the lazy evaluation, yeah, lazy evaluations. Yeah. Process data only when it is actually needed. Use generators, streams, deferred execution, and deferred execution to avoid computing values that might never be used. Yeah. So in the previous example, yeah, we have some calculation result in a particular page. Yeah. So lazy evaluation means that uh, before the value or before the data is really needed, we don't need to calculate it first, yeah. Okay, so in a mobile application, for example, yeah, the previous mobile application, those page, yeah, it is not always open by the user. For example, that maybe those page is certain page that is located in certain menu, yeah. And this menu is not always opened by the user. So lazy evaluation means that those calculation will only be calculated whenever the user is really opening those page. Yeah, this is what I mean by lazy evaluation. That means that those calculation result is really needed at that time. So the result will be calculated at that time. Yeah. So the opposite of lazy evaluation is that when we are doing something like this, so instead of calculating the result whenever the user exactly open the page, we we calculate the result whenever the applications is launching, yeah, at the startup. So that is not lazy evaluations, yeah. This is like a preemptive, yeah, preemptive computation, yeah. And that is not good, yeah. Why? Because why we do something that it is not that we don't know that we don't know whether the calculation will be needed or not, yeah. Okay, so this is good practice in green coding, yeah. This the core principles, yeah. Avoid redundant computation, sketching and memorization, choose right data structure, and also uh, implement lazy evaluation. Okay, and this is about the data structure. We have so many data structure. We have list, we have array, we have unsorted list, we have full list load, we have list, we have sorted list. Yeah, those data type, data structure. Um, we have to understand each of it. Yeah, we have to know. We have to take a look. Yeah, what is it actually? Yeah, so we have list and we have array, for example. In a particular programming language, array and we have also set, yeah, for example, yeah. So in some programming languages, array, it is different from set, yeah. Array is something that can have the redundant element, yeah, but set is a unique element, yeah. So that is example of two different data structure, yeah. So what I mean by choosing the right data structure related to energy impact here is that we have to understand in which data structure that is more suitable for certain use case, yeah, for certain purpose, yeah. For example, if you want to do search or look up, list or array is inefficient because the complexity is O n, yeah. On meaning that if we have 10 data, so we will need 10 amount of time to finish the operation, yeah. So instead of using list or array for search or lookup, we can use hash map or dictionary data, yeah, because if we use hash map or dictionary, the complexity will be O1. This is meaning that whatever whatever the numbers of our data, the time needed to finish the operation is only 1 unit of time, yeah. So this is the most efficient, yeah, the best complexity is O1, yeah. So how many the we don't care how many the data we have, the time needed will always be 1, yeah. So same goes to the other use case and use cases and data structures, yeah, such as when you want to do sorted collections, and avoid to use unsorted list. Instead you can use balance BST or heap. And then if you want to do stream processing, avoid to use full list load, you can use generator or stream instead. When you want to do uniqueness check, avoid to use list or loop, yeah, list and loop, because the complexity will be O n square. Yeah, this is this is uh, very inefficient, yeah. And then instead you can choose set, yeah, has set, because you will need only O1 complexity, yeah. This is if any numbers of data we have, we just need 1 unit amount of time. When if you want to do priority queue, avoid to use sorted list, yeah, and instead you can use heap data structure, yeah. If you forgot about what is a hash shed, what is stream, you can take a look at your uh, previous material in your previous course, yeah. And now we go to the topic number 3. It is about the input-output optimization and parallelism. Yeah. So, input-output meaning that in our software, in our software systems, uh, we will always use this one, the input output device, yeah. So what is input output device? Yeah, input output device is any device that is needed to receive the data and also to show the data. So mainly it will be related to storage, yeah, like storage, yeah, and then network, and also for example like database, yeah. So why this is important? Because input operation, writing something or reading something from the computer, yeah, um, are among the largest energy consumers in software. Yeah? So it is one of the most energy consumers in the software. Yeah? So something like this reads, network call, and query to the database, it will consume far more energy than pure computation. Yeah, and they leave the CPU idle while waiting. Yeah. Okay, so compared to computation, usually input output energy input output devices or input output operations will require more energy. Yeah. So this is, for example, yeah, disk input output. For example, if we use it for batch reads or writes, we can it will need around 3 to 8 watts. Yeah, 3 to 8 watts when active and also 0.5 watt when idle. Yeah, this is just estimates. So the best practice whenever you want to do disk input output operations, you can use batch reads or writes, use buffering and enable sleep modes. Yeah, batch reads meaning that we can do it in group. Yeah, batch can also means group. Yeah. Next is about the network I/O. Yeah, it can consume like 0.5 to 5 watts per gigabyte per second. Yeah. So in order to minimize this energy drain, yeah, you can compress your payload, minimize round trips and gauge responses. Yeah. So for example, when you create an application that is sending data from the client to the soft server, for example, yeah, before sending the data to the server, it is better for you to compress it first, yeah, to compress it first, yeah, to compress the data and then send it, yeah. This will be much better than when you send the data in raw, yeah, in raw format, because so many bytes, so many bits, yeah, will be transferred along the network, yeah, along the network. Okay, and database, yeah, database. This can be also minimize the energy that is used by avoiding the n+1 queries. Yeah, use connection pooling and implement index properly. You have learned index in the previous semester, right? So use your knowledge in creating the database. Don't forget to index your data properly. Yeah. And what about n+1? N+1 queries is classic, ya, classic problem, classic energy problem, efficiency problem in software n+1 queries. Yeah, this is meaning that whenever you query something, you do it first, select it all, and then for each of the result, you do again another operation, yeah, another select. Yeah, this is uh, n+1 query. So this is not very good input output in terms of energy drain. Yeah. So example of n minus one queries. Yeah. For example, you want to display students data. Yeah. You select all of the students. For example, you will have maybe in a class you have 30 students. Yeah. So select all from students. You got 30 lines. Yeah. And then again in your codes, for each of the students in those 30 lines, you are doing again select. Yeah. So this is what we call by n+1 queries, and these are not and those are is very very inefficient. Yeah. So avoid that one. And then next is for IO green strategies. First is batch IO. You can combine many small operation into one. Yes, you can group smaller operations, many smaller operation into one. Yeah. And it will reduce head movement in disk. Yeah, head movement mean this is usually referred to hard disk. Yeah, if you use hard disk in our computer, uh, there will be some component called head. Yeah, this is the component that is moving, yeah, moving forward, downward, yeah, and then move to the front and the back, yeah, in the hard disk, because hard disk is rotating, yeah, and then it will be writing the data into the hard disk. It is the command word called by head. Yeah. So batch IO will make the head moves moves a little bit less than we are doing smaller operation, but many times. Yeah. So instead of doing many operations, like the head will move like here and there, it will move frantically. Yeah. So but if we use batch IO, it will write the data uh, in near, yeah, in a near location. So the movement will not so frantic. Yeah. Okay, and then about the asynchronous I/O, CPU doesn't block waiting for I/O. Non-blocking calls let the CPU handle other tasks while I/O completes. Yeah. So asynchronous I/O meaning that um, you are doing another thing, yeah, you are doing another thing in your programs without waiting for the IO operations to be finished. Yeah, this is what I mean by asynchronous IO. Because why? Because the CPU will work continuously. The CPU will work continuously. On the other side, the storage is still working. The input output device is still working. If you are not implementing asynchronous as input output, the CPU will need your program will the CPU will continue to work while waiting for the disk, and this is not so efficient. Then next, minimize data transfer, send only what is needed, use compression, paginations, and selective field queries. Yeah, so this is especially can be implemented when you create web applications. Usually, when you want to show some things to the user, a lot of data to the users. Yeah, uh, you don't want to send, yeah, all of the data. For example, you have 100 rows, yeah, 100 rows. So instead of selecting all of the rows and then showing it to the users in a same page, yeah, you can do paginations. Yeah. So for example, in the first page we only show the data 1 till 10, yeah, and then whenever the user click next, it will show again from 11 to 20. Yeah, and then when the user click next again, it will show 21st until 30th, yeah, of the data. Yeah, so that is what we can do to minimize data transfer. And then data locality means that uh, it is better for us to process the data in its place, yeah, in its place. Yeah. Okay, so for example, like when you have the data, usually this is uh, related to the software that use uh, complex computation. Yeah, usually whenever a mobile application, yeah, needs to process, yeah, the data uh, in order to make uh, the thing more simple. Yeah, usually the programmers lazy, yeah, to think how to process the data in the mobile phone. So instead they will send the data to the server, and then after the data is processed, then it will return back to the mobile application. So that is not data locality. That is not correspond to the data locality principle. If we implement data locality principle, we are doing the processing of the data in the place where the data is located. Yeah. So for example, if we have application mobile, for example, to detect something from image, for example, yeah, instead of doing taking picture and then sending the picture to the server and then process and then give the result back to the mobile, we can do like process the picture and then we process the result in the device and then directly show to the user. This is what we mean by data locality. Okay. Then we next is about the parallelism. So usually the more skillful programmer, they will create those they will create their software multi-threads, yeah, multi-threads. Um, Of course, multi-thread or parallelism, of course it is good. Why? Because large amount of process can be done in a less time, yeah, in less time. Okay, so parallelism is good. Yeah. So instead of doing something and then this one, yeah, first thing, second thing, and then third thing, and then fourth thing, and then something like that. This is not parallel. This is serial processing. If we doing parallel, it will become first thing and then second thing and then or maybe first thing, second thing, third thing in the same time. Yeah, that is good. Yeah, that is good for system. Yeah, so because instead of waiting too long uh, for the operation, for all of the operations to be finished, we can run we can run several, yeah, operations in a same time, in the same time. Okay, yeah. That is good in one side, but if it is done not carefully, it will cost us more energy. Yeah. Okay, so it cannot be done wrong. In order to get the benefits of parallelism while maximizing the energy efficiency, we need to do the parallelism in a right way. Yeah. This is several examples of best practice how to make our parallelism more efficient. First, yeah, avoid too many threads, yeah, because each thread consumes stack of memory. Context switching burns CPU cycles moving between threads. Yeah. So instead of doing that, we have to do optimal thread count. So we need to match threads to available CPU cores, and more threads than the cores causing thrashing, not speeds. Yeah. So if you create an applications, please you have to also aware about your server. Yeah. How many processor it has. Yeah. How many RAM it has, etc. Yeah. So when we create multi-thread applications, we need to match the number of threads to the available cores of the CPU. For example, if I have a CPU with 4 cores, with quad cores processors, so the thread that I need to create is the maximum of it should be 4. Yeah, of course we can create 5, 6, 7 and many threads, but if the processor cores is just 4, then the rest of the threads will become trash. Yeah, will become trash. It is no use because it is still waiting. Yeah. Then next, avoid busy waiting or spin lock. This is a thread that continuously pulls with the true check waste 100% of CPU during doing nothing useful. Yeah. Okay. Instead, we need to implement asynchronous or non-blocking. So we can use async await or even loops. So CPU handles other work while waiting for IOs. IO no idle will have no idle waste. Yeah. Okay. So because like I said before, when a long process is still be done, whenever it is IO, the IO is slower. Yeah, IO is slower compared to the processor. Yeah, when we are doing calculation, we are using processor. Where we are doing input output, we are using hard disk or storage, something like that. So storage is slower than CPU, than computing and computer operation. So we need to use asynchronous or non-blocking, so we can left the operations to the IO, and we can continue to do, yeah, the next job, the next operations continuously, yeah, without waiting the operations in the input output finish first. Yeah, this is what I mean by async or non-blocking. Yeah. Next is thread contentions. Yeah. Threads competing for the same lock serialized execution. Parallel code become efficiently sequential, and it is also added with overhead. Yeah. So we need to avoid this one, what we call by thread contention. Yeah. What is thread contentions? It is thread that is racing. So they try to win the the resource that is needed to be accessed. Yeah. So we have only one resource, and this resource is locked, but we have 4 threads. These 4 threads are trying as hard as they can to get the resource. Yeah. This is what we call by thread race. Yeah. So we need to avoid that. So instead of doing that, we need to think about throughput over the speed. Yeah. So we need to design for total work completed per unit of energy, not raw maximum speed. Think energy per job. Yeah. So we need to abandon, yeah, our thinking that fast is everything. Yeah, that the less time is everything. So we need also think about the energy. So in other words, we need to think throughput over speed. Yeah, don't just look for speed, yeah, but also look about the energy, how much energy the operation will need, the parallelism will need. Yeah. Okay. The last topic is about profiling and refactoring and ethics. So now we already understand that in our software there are so many aspects related to the green software, related to how to make our software greener. In this topic, we want to discuss. We will discuss about some tools, some tools to measure how much energy impact in our software or in our applications. Yeah. Because this is important. Why? Because there are some quotation for some quote for Peter Drucker. It is man, yeah, who is important in the field of management, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So he said that something that you can measure, you will not be able to improve it. Yeah. So in order for us to be able to improve something, we need to know the level, the base level of its first. Yeah. If we cannot measure the level at the time, then how can we improve? Yeah. How can we know that the thing that we already done is really improving the software? Yeah. So it needs you needs to know, yeah, you need to know what kind of software, what kind of tools that can be used to track or to calculate the energy that you need in your software. Yeah. For example, here is several examples of measuring software that is quite popular today. First one is Code Carbon. It is measuring the CO2 emission tracking, and it is used in Python. Yeah. It wraps your code, reports key CO2 emitted per turn per run, and great for machine learning training jobs. Yeah. We have also Intel Power Gadget. It is chip CPU energy measurement. It is available in Windows and Mac OS. It is for real-time wattage data from CPU or hardware counters. Yeah. And it is kind of developer tool. And next we have also Perf or Power Stat. Yeah. This is just like the Intel Power Gadget plus minus. Yeah. But it is available for Linux. Yeah. So if the previous one, Intel Power Gadget, is only available in Windows or Mac OS, if your computer is Linux, you can use Perf or PowerStat. Yeah. Okay, and then we have also Scapander. Yeah, Scapander is container or VM energy. This is tool to measure to expose per process energy in virtual environments, and it works with Prometheus. Next is the C profile or P instrument. This is performance profiling for Python programming language. It will identify CPU hotspots combined with the code carbon to find energy heavy function. Yeah. Okay. Now, energy hotspots, analysis and refactoring strategy. We have common energy hotspots. Energy hotspots meaning that there are certain place that is needing energy much more than others. Yeah. So we have four common energy hotspots. First one is of course inefficient loop. Yeah, you do loop. Yeah, that is not needed. It is inefficient loop. And then heavy IO calls. Yeah, it is meaning that in your software, it is writing a lot of data and reading a lot of data from the storage for your machine. And then large memory blocks, it is allocating and freeing large arrays repeatedly, triggers GC cycles and memory pressures. Yeah. And also we have inefficient recursion. Recursion is calling the same function inside its functions. Yeah. So we have function, and then inside those function it is calling itself. Yeah. It is what we call by recursion. So recursion will needs a lot of energy, and it will be worse if you doing your recursions not in an efficient way. Yeah. Okay, and then next is semantic refactoring process. Uh, First, you do your profiling. Yeah. So measure CPU memory time and identify the top 20% of code causing 80% of energy use. Next, identify hotspots, find loops, I/O calls, and memory patterns that appear disproportionately in the profiles. Next, you can measure the energy, use code carbon or RAPL to get actual joule or carbon dioxide numbers per functions. And then you can do refactoring, apply caching, patching, async IO, lazy evaluation, better data structure, and finally you can verify the result, reprofile, you run again your profiler software and confirm energy that and confirm whether the energy is really reduced or not. Yeah. You can rerun the test, commit, and then commit with carbon matrix. Yeah. This is energy hotspot analysis and refactoring strategy. Next is about the energy aware CI/CD in the and the ethics of green coding. So whenever we deploy modern software, usually we will implement what we call by energy aware CI/CD. CI/CD is it's acronym from continuous integration and continuous development. Yeah, CI continuous integration, CD continuous development. Yeah. So uh, in order to make the process of deploying software also more efficient, we can follow some of this best practice. Yeah. So first, we of course need to integrate carbon measurement into every build. Yeah. Track it like code quality. Yeah. So other than placing the measurement in our source code, we need to also measure the CI/CD pipeline that we are using. Yeah. Okay. So there are so many steps in CI/CD, for example, like commit and then build and then test and then report and then display, something like that. And this in this step we have to enable the energy profiling, because each of this process will consume certain amount of energy. For example, when the developers doing commit, uh, it is also needed to be measured. Yeah. And then when it is built, CI runs build code carbon measuring energy for compile step. You can use code carbon in build section. Yeah. And then in test section, unit test run, energy per test suite is logged. And then carbon budget check did this commit increase emissions or not. Yeah. And then deploy, you can deploy only if energy matrix pass threshold or green plan. Yeah. This is CI/CD pipeline that is energy aware. Yeah. And then the ethics of green computing, we need transparency, we need to know and disclose the energy cost of our software, and we should not hide it. Yeah. Then next is awareness. Every engineering decision has an energy consequence, and you need to be conscious of it. Next is responsibility. The software affects the physical world through electricity. So engineers own this impact. So this is our responsibility as an engineer, because our software that we have created, it will interact to the real world, and subsequently it will also generate electricity and carbon dioxide. Yeah. Next is sustainability. Green coding is not optional. It is professional obligation for the next generation of engineers. Yeah. So this is for your generations will become harder. Yeah, if you want to go to the software subject. Yeah, if you want to work on software subject. Yeah. Okay. So that's all that I need to explain to you. And before I conclude this session, we have several takeaways in green coding at the source code level. Yeah. First, you need to understand that algorithm complexity is equals to energy complexity. The more complex your software, the more energy your software will consume. Next, you need to avoid unnecessary work. So redundant computation, excessive input output, and memory churn are the biggest code level energy wastes. Yeah, wastage. Yeah. So cache, batch, and reuse. Next, write structure right cost. Hash map versus list, stream versus full load. Every data structure choice has a complexity. So you need to understand what is the data types and in what use case those data types or data structures will be more useful, will be more efficient. Yeah. Then for input output is expensive, you need to treat it that way. So EO input output is expensive operations because it requires many mechanical movement and subsequently it will need a lot more electricity. So you need to be careful when you are using input output operations. Then next is measure before optimizing. You can use code carbon, perf or perf gadget. You need to profile, yeah, find the hotspots that requires a lot the most energy and then do refactor. Yeah, don't guess, yeah, don't guess, don't just guess, oh maybe this one we need to change this one. Don't, yeah. So you need to measure it, you need to make sure that those is really energy hotspot and then you can refactor it, yeah. Then the last thing is that green coding is professional ethics. Yeah, software consumes real electricity, so our software consumes real electricity, even though it is digital, but it consumes real electricity. So engineers who write it are responsible. So we are responsible for our software's carbon footprint. Yeah, this is digital sustainability. Yeah. Okay, so. That is all that I need to explain to you students in these sessions. So we have some quotes here. So, every line of code you write is an energy decision. Write it like you care about the planet. So again, don't just write your source code. Whenever you already work or whenever you create a software for your clients or whenever you create a software that will be used by a lot of number of users, just please not just do your software so you can achieve your goal. Please not thinking like this is just work, yeah. So not that one. So you need to think so that your software is working, but your software also care about your planet. Yeah. So this is uh, our sessions today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am apologizing if there is something that is you don't like from me in this session or if there is any mistake in this session. So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.